Anytime you send 3,000 guys and girls in the U.S. Army into a country that is ridden with Ebola, there's a chance that U.S. soldiers could get infected with it. But like I said, I think we've been prepared pretty well with our medical training to deal with it.
Welcome back to Midpoint, and also welcome back the Deputy Health Editor of Newsmax.com, Nick Tate, joins us here in the studio as we further the discussion now on what is happening in the country with regard to Ebola. Our military is in Western Africa right now. But I think the difference here is that what that young man said, we're trained. These are guys and gals who have spent the time in training. The nurses that we're talking about right now in Dallas and other places, they say they haven't been trained. So there is a difference, and even you noted maybe stopping people from coming here, but so many people I talk to say we must be sending our people there, because if we don't lead the way, this will get worse. America's the only one who can really get this done.
I think that that's true. I mean, I do believe the one thing that we've heard from CDC that's absolutely true is we need to stop this outbreak in West Africa, because if it gets beyond West Africa, then we're looking at a completely different picture. We do have the wherewithal. We have highly trained doctors and nurses, as well as military folks who can control. They know how not to make the mistakes that we saw in Dallas. You know, the big picture here is that right now the folks who are most at risk are not the average American. The people who are most at risk are the healthcare workers, particularly those in smaller local hospitals that don't have this training. So stopping it there, I think, makes perfect sense. We also need to, in my opinion, be moving toward transferring those Ebola patients as soon as they're diagnosed in a local hospital to one of those 4 facilities around the country that do have that kind of training.
Are we going to looking at it, and again, I'm just trying to extrapolate this and go a little bit deeper, because you have a lot of small hospitals around the country, small doctors' offices. Not everybody has a large hospital that they can basically rely on. But are we looking at a time where in our near future there are going to be emergency teams, if you will, that will be located throughout the United States, that could be within a day of any place, or even less, maybe a few hours of any major or small city? So if there's something, they can react almost like a SWAT team.
Well, that's what the president was saying yesterday, is that's what we need to do, but we are just certainly not there yet. The other thing to keep in mind is there's a lot of money that the training requires, and getting those people in that area, those areas, is important. Establishing regional centers, the way we have regional offices of the EPA, the FDA, I think regional offices of CDC would be a wise thing to do. I also think, nobody's talking about this, but maybe for now, every hospital has a CDC sentinel, some doctor, some professional, or an infectious disease specialist on hand right there in the case somebody shows up. As we head into the cold and flu season, we're going to be seeing tens of thousands of people walking into ERs and not knowing whether their fever is flu, cold, some other illness, or potentially Ebola. Having somebody on hand to assess that quickly and correctly, I think, is going to be really important this season.
And flu kills more people in this country than Ebola. Well, certainly it's brand new here, but flu kills a tremendous amount of people in this country.
It's not to be underestimated and taken for granted. Now, I don't want to make it sound like we shouldn't worry about the Ebola. We need to worry about the Ebola crisis and do more. But here's the single most important thing you can do to protect yourself as a consumer. Get a flu shot, reduce your risk for flu, because 30,000 people a year die from flu and flu complications. Another 22,000 die from pneumonia. Those are 2 things you can be vaccinated against. There is no Ebola vaccine, but there is a flu vaccine, there's a pneumonia vaccine. If you could get an Ebola vaccine, would you get one? Of course. So why wouldn't you get a flu vaccine? Why wouldn't you get a pneumonia vaccine?
Is there any sort of an idea, because the company that makes ZMapp is American-based, and they are now saying they put everything else on hold, they're 24/7 now to create this drug. Is there any sort of idea as to how long it would take, months or years, to be able to inoculate or have something ready for everybody in America?
I don't even think it's possible to even estimate how long it would take. You know, the current schedule for drug approval is a minimum of about a year from development to approval to actually getting to the market. That's the minimum. That's another problem, you know, with the FDA and the time it takes because of the red tape. They do have the option of fast tracking these drugs, but first of all, the experimental drugs have not proven to be 100% effective. They don't know if they're safe, they don't know if they're effective, and getting enough of them in the supply chain where they could actually provide some inoculation and some protection is really more of a thing for the future. I think that's one of the things that will be evaluated, though, as we look back. We will get through this crisis, we hope, but I think the question will be, how do we apply those lessons to prevent future outbreaks, to prevent not just Ebola outbreaks, but other viral outbreaks that really pose a risk, and inoculate this population.
30 seconds. Ohio, Texas schools, some of them are closing because they think somebody might have been in contact with an Ebola-affected person. Is that too much of a knee-jerk?
Well, possibly. You know, the truth is that one of the myths is that you can somehow get Ebola by simply being exposed to somebody who has been exposed to Ebola. That's not the case. People have to have symptoms first. You have to have contact with bodily fluids. So that's an extra precaution. You understand why people are taking it, but it may not entirely be warranted at this point.
Calm. Don't throw the myths and misconceptions out like hack syndicated radio talk show hosts who always want to seem like the world is coming to an end.
Right, absolutely.
Calm down. Always a pleasure, Nick. Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure, thank you.
Later on this hour, what if Black America were a country? And what is the truth to the charge of white racial privilege? And after the break, the reason why no one should be the least bit shocked at the beheading of those who do not bow to the will of Islamic terrorists. That and much more coming up right here on Midpoint.